Hello and welcome back to the Unclouded Eye, where we're coming at you with astrological forecasts for this week and a little bit of cosmic chit chat. I'm your host, the healthy one for once, Ty Gowan, and feeling a little bit under the weather this week, so we're staying remote again, is my co-host, Ashley Brooks. How you feeling, Ash?
Hello. Oh, I'm okay. I'm glad that we are remote. I really look forward to a nice, healthy podcast recording in person, but we're not there yet. It's
It's ironic
flu
that we
season.
recorded the last 2 weeks to keep you healthy, and she found you anyway.
Yeah, like everyone at my work has been sick, and Jay has been sick, and I really held out for so long, and
You're a warrior of the stars, Ash, so that we
yeah,
can get these people their forecast this week.
yeah, it's okay. It's a little foggy, but we're gonna do our best here.
I'll help you out like you helped me out the last 2 weeks because,
Thankfully.
man, that first one, I was in the fog of it all. So
Oh
I
my
hope that
God.
episode came out good for
I liked
everybody.
it. I thought it was great. Yeah. And actually, there's not as much happening in the stars the next 2 weeks as there has been. So that's very helpful for me personally.
It's like, as the steward of the stars, they had your back these next 2 weeks. They
Yeah. They're
knew.
like, you need a
So
rest. All right.
I'll
Here you
double
go.
down with some pretty good stories to tell you then, so to make up for that content. But
Lovely.
in light of the limited amount of Kleenex you probably have, do you want to just jump into the forecast this week?
Yeah. Let's do it. And then we can always do more cosmic chit chat later if we need to, you know?
Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely.
All right. So let's see, we're talking about the 14th through the 20th this week. And yeah, like I said, there's a few transits happening. Next week is very, very quiet, but this week is like starting to get a little quieter. So on Monday, the 14th, we have two transits happening. We have the sun squaring Mars at 4:15 a.m. Eastern Time. And then later in the day, we have Venus opposing Uranus at 6:22 p.m. So the Sun square Mars and the Venus opposite Uranus transits will be felt all day. They're not going to be just like delegated to that one time of the day.
Is
So
that like a heavy war feeling because we got Sun and empowering Mars there?
yeah. So
Okay.
Sun is squaring Mars, so they're going head to head. They're kind of like butting heads right now. So yes, you could feel really frustrated. You could feel a little more irritable, a little just impulsive, but yeah, it's definitely a warlike kind of fighting temperamental transit, and it could make you really annoyed if somebody tries to tell you no about something. You're going to really want to like push forward.
Oh, that's great
And
because that's
yeah,
me every day.
I know.
So yeah.
Yeah, and people might not be nice about it. You know what I mean? Sometimes, like, if somebody's told no, they're like, all right, well, I'll figure out a different way. They're going to be like, no, I'm going to do it anyway. Like, just very rebellious, especially because Venus is opposing Uranus. So there could be some surprises coming up in relationships. People could be acting a little bit different than how they normally do. You might find that
Ew.
some people could surprise you with their behavior. So all of this sort of could add up to some weird stuff going on Monday. I know some people have the day off from work, so maybe you'll kind of escape some of this, or maybe you'll notice it in the peripheral, like online or something, or
Hmm.
maybe you'll be out and about and you'll notice it happening. But yeah, there could be some surprises in relationships, people acting out of character, impulsive behavior. So just be careful if you notice yourself feeling frustrated. Keep in mind, you could say things you regret. Just be aware of that.
That's really interesting. That we've had really positive forecasts, I think, a lot through September, even August or so, in the first 2 weeks of October. This is probably being on this podcast. This is probably one of the rougher weeks you've described as far as interpersonal relationships.
Yeah, that the start to the week for sure. And Tuesday actually brings a brighter and happier transit, so that's
Okay.
nice. On Tuesday the 15th, we have Venus trining Neptune at 8:48 p.m. And again, this is building throughout the day. We're going to feel it throughout the day. And Venus is currently in Scorpio. Neptune has been in Pisces for many years. And so this trine is a positive, helpful transit that is connecting these in an uplifting way. And so this can be helpful for building compassion and empathy, seeing where other people are coming from, being a little softer and gentler. And it's also great for expanding the imagination and the intuition. So this is positive. This helps us to kind of get through that warlike energy of
Hmm.
Monday that you mentioned.
Probably almost in a complete flip from Monday, like you said, just the way that that's going.
Yeah, for sure. Like that softens the energy. And
Mm-hmm.
then Thursday, we have 3 transits happening, and then that's it for the rest of the week. So Thursday is definitely a busy day astrologically, and then it gets quiet until next week. So at 7:26 a.m., we have our full supermoon in Aries, Ty.
It's a big Mars week for me.
Yeah, exactly. You're gonna like turn into a superhero this week, more so than usual. Um,
Aw.
at 8:30 a.m., we have Venus sextile Pluto, and then at 3:28 p.m., Venus is moving into Sagittarius. So let's go through all those one by one.
A lot of Venusian energy going on this week.
Yes, and last week we had some relationship stuff coming up, or I think it might have been last week or the week before. So yeah, it's October is a pretty Venusian relationship heavy month so
Yeah.
far.
Aphrodite is getting her spotlight in October.
Yes, yes.
Hmm.
So the full supermoon in Aries, full moon in Aries is going to always be all about carving your own destiny, going out and doing your own thing, and maybe having to break away from the group somewhat in order to do it. This might be a time for you to question kind of like the group dynamics in your life and figure out, okay, like all my friends are doing this. Do I want to do this? Like, do I genuinely want to, or am I just kind of feeling the pressure to do it because everyone else is? A lot of like peer pressure stuff could come up. And even though we are adults, that can still
That's
happen.
still there.
It's
That's
still there.
Yeah.
For sure, in a different way. It's not like maybe what the DARE program made it out to be, but, at least for us now. But yeah, so you're going to maybe have some themes coming up of group dynamics versus thinking for yourself versus doing your own thing. So, yeah, that's definitely a big theme of this full moon. And the more that you can listen to what it is that you really want to be doing, then the better that this energy will go for you.
It's funny you mentioned the DARE program because that is going to be a future topic that we go through on this podcast.
Are you
Uh,
serious?
It's going to be. Yeah, I
Oh
listened
my
to a
God.
podcast called You're Wrong About that did a deep dive on the DARE program, and I'm going to follow their lead because it's a fascinating failure that actually accidentally clued more children onto drugs than it did prevent. And so there's a
That
lot
checks out.
there's a lot of failure that I want to go over with the DARE program, but that's a future episode we'll focus on.
Did you get those weird pencils when you were in the DARE program? I got these pencils, and they were like the old fashioned kind that you would like literally like sharpen, like they weren't mechanical pencils.
Yeah.
And they said, don't do drugs. It was like DARE, don't do drugs. But the way that you sharpened it, the don't would disappear.
For your first, you're right. Yeah, exactly.
So it would say do drugs.
Do drugs, DARE. Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. I think that's even mentioned on the podcast of like these colossal oversights and failures for the
that
DARE
was,
program.
I remember feeling weird about that. Like, did they check this?
No one checked anything in the DARE program. They just wung
my
it.
God. Wow.
Anyways, that's it for the week though already.
Yeah, so we have Venus sextile Pluto before it moves into Sagittarius. So this is the last transit Venus makes while it's still in Scorpio. And Venus sextile Pluto is really great for like super focused work on creative and artistic projects, really like figuring out all the little details, maybe kind of seeing under the surface, seeing kind of like the energy and intention behind it. So it's great if you're a writer to kind of figure out what your intention is, or like an artist. And the same thing with relationships too. You might be able to like deeply and more intimately connect with friends or loved ones. And then Venus moves into Sagittarius later that day, 3:28 p.m. Going to be there till November 11th. And Venus in Sagittarius is much more playful and adventurous. It's all about maybe going out and doing things with loved ones, traveling, trying new things, introducing more of a fun-loving, adventurous energy into your creative projects, your love life, your friendships, and it's less about like deep commitment or super emotional. It's a little more playful and fun. So yeah.
Hey, that Thursday Pluto energy. Maybe we should meet up about podcast planning. Then sounds perfect for it.
That would
Yeah.
work for sure.
Cool.
Yep. All
It's a
right, so
date.
that's what I got for you.
Cool.
I made it through.
I'm glad. Yeah, you made it through in record time. The stars were easy on you, and I unfortunately am about to come at you with one of the most complicated topics that we've done so far.
That's
So
okay. I'm ready.
yeah, it'll be a good story time. There's just no way that I can even scratch the surface of this topic. in the amount of time given. It's so in depth, so interesting that we can do a deep dive later sometime. But here's like basically the highest level information about Hermeticism and the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn.
Wow. Okay. All
Are
right.
you
I didn't even.
familiar?
Yes. I mean,
Okay,
a little bit. Just like there's like an Aleister like Crowley
yeah.
connotation with that. Are we? We're not talking about that today.
We're not inviting Aleister Crowley on this podcast
Okay.
whatsoever. There's just
Yeah.
so many. Yeah,
There's a
that's not
lot
the
of.
energy we're bringing in here.
No, no. Yeah, I mean, I guess I only know it through like that, and maybe
Yeah,
there's some like tarot decks that like reference it. Like that's I am looking forward to hearing where you're gonna bring us with this topic.
perfect. So yes, Crowley was a member. He did practice it. It does get related to him sometimes, but with us being such a Chiron focused, friendly podcast, I reject everything that Crowley has in store for us.
Okay.
But yeah, we're not playing Crowley's games here. He's dead and gone. So the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn interested me first because of my interest in alchemy, just learning historically
Yes.
how it worked. And kind of dipping into that, I learned a little bit about a text called the Emerald Tablet. And also from that, I got into the Golden Dawn. And I had like a couple months last summer that I was just reading all these texts, and they were fascinating.
Oh yeah.
So yes, Golden Dawn is neat. It's really hard to talk about. So we're gonna dip back into the historical portions of it a little bit more than like actually getting into the practice of the Golden Dawn. So Hermeticism actually reaches back to around the year 300 BCE, and it
Wow.
comes from an Egyptian mystic known as Hermes Trismegistus. And I'm probably butchering that name. So we're just gonna call him Hermes the thrice great. Like so he's three times powerful is what
Okay.
his name means. He combines elements of the Greek god Hermes with the Egyptian god Thoth into like one historical person. And for people on just listening to the audio of this, I did air quotes around person.
Yeah.
Because he's like almost a deity himself. He's known to be given power over writing, magic, astrology, like for you, Ash, and alchemy for me. So
Cool.
like it's really interesting that he touches a lot of these topics that people who are a little bit occultly inclined tend to sway towards. But he also has roots in modern religious practices, and this is weird. But in the Christian Bible, he could be viewed as like the counterpart to the Moses story almost, where both men were given divine powers to use for the benefit of humankind. Moses got the spotlight, and Hermes, the thrice great, kind of leveled into obscurity there.
Yeah, I've never even heard his name, honestly.
Yeah, well, in Jewish traditions, he's actually believed that he could have been the figure that taught Abraham.
Oh wow. Okay.
And in Islam, he's associated with the prophet Idris. So it's really neat that he's not specifically mentioned in these religious texts, but he's believed to have been a power player in these biblical stories that are now interpreted in different religious ways. So yeah, you wouldn't have heard of him unless you were a researcher from 1400s Italy, honestly.
Okay.
So
Not
this
that. I'm not that.
1400s Italy is the first time that they actually are able to translate some of these Hermetic texts, and they find out that these texts less so are about religion, which they thought originally they might be, additives to Christianity. And they find out, no, they're actually occult teachings that link together philosophy and magic, and how human thought and belief systems are magic too. And that's kind of what got me really interested in it, is like you are what you believe.
Yeah.
So the Hermetica is what it's called at that time, and it helps to revolutionize medical knowledge of the time. And there's also a compact version of it that I mentioned earlier called the Emerald Tablet. It teaches, then the Emerald Tablet specifically teaches philosophy through the study of alchemy, whereas the Hermetica teaches mostly medical knowledge and an insight through the works of Hermes himself.
Oh,
So
cool.
however, in the year 1400s, it's like the Italian researchers don't really care too much about that. They're really focusing on hoping these texts can help them learn to turn lead into gold. Like that was the goal, fell short. But as we move forward in history, people start to understand that these texts do have value. And there's people still studying it to this day because of that value. In these students who are still studying the Hermeticism, their belief is that there's a library out there in the world that houses 42 essential texts that relate to the Hermetic, not the Golden Dawn, but the Hermetic teachings of Hermes the Thrice Great. And this library is their version of the Holy Grail. It's the last of the teachings of Hermes' wisdom that he passed on. So that's kind of their version of the Christian cup of Christ, right?
Yeah.
Is knowledge. So it's cool that they're literally looking for more knowledge.
That's awesome. I love that.
So we're going to jump forward because we could go really deep into what these texts mean. But again, we're just going to have to pop over to London, England, 1887 right now for that deep search of knowledge that I was just telling you about. So it's 1887 and we're going to have another secret society moment.
Ooh.
And that secret society moment is what's going to relate to the natal chart today.
Okay.
So secret society time, we now have William Woodman, William Westcott, and Samuel Mathers, who are three Freemasons who are interested in exploring the occult nature of the Hermetic writings and want to explore their own spiritual development at the same time without going through the Catholic Church to do it. They want to use metaphysics and mysticism. So together they marry the hierarchy of the Freemason practices of how you can level up in Freemasonry and gain more knowledge there through practice with your community. But they're taking the Hermetic principles and overlaying those to create the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, which is a secret society with the core principle of harnessing magic and worldly wisdom. Like that is what they're all about, which is I want to call that out because, again, sometimes they get associated with poo-poo Crowley. And they were really just looking for knowledge more so than learning how to do crap magic.
Yeah, he was very sexist. For anyone who doesn't know, like there's just a lot of like weird sexism and possible racism coming from him. So
I would
that's
say
why we're
probable racism
okay.
coming
Yeah.
from he
Yeah.
loved to be dominant in all relationships, and he actually practiced a lot of magic that used human feces. And
Oh, that's why you're calling him Poo Poo Crowley.
Yeah, Poo Poo Crowley is like he had shit magic. Like that's really just what his
Yeah,
his
no thanks.
his form of magic is, I think it's called like the left hand path, and it's, if you ever want to look that up, it gets human fluidity very fast. So yeah, there's better ways to explore the ether, I think, that don't harm other people in your circle.
There's so many better, there's like so many wonderful smelling herbs and like flowers we can use in magic.
Your magic practice could harm no one and smell great at the same time, which is the opposite of what Crowley was capable of. So, yeah. But I'm going to hit you up with just a couple cool things about the Hermetic Order that I think you'll in particular like, Ash, is that it's actually split into three different sects of magic. The first order, and you had to pick one that you wanted to be like challenging, almost like I knew that would get your
like
Harry
Skyrim
Potter vibes
or something.
It's like Skyrim. Yeah, this is your skill tree regarded to if you were in the first order. It teaches philosophy based on the Hermetic Kabbalah. In this sect studied the elements of astrology and tarot. They were also highly divinatory. And fun fact, Pamela Coleman Smith was actually in this sect.
Oh yeah, that's awesome. I remember like hearing about the fact that she had like the Golden Dawn study. Oh my God, my brain is breaking.
No,
again.
that's okay. Yes, she studied the Golden Dawn and her tarot practice, and actually, she was the one who created the Rider-Waite deck, right?
Yes, yeah, she did the art for it. Yep.
So that comes from Hermeticism. So there you go. Neat, right? It's all connected once you start to dig.
So that's the first sect. What else do we have?
I think you'd be in the first order. I think I would be in the second order, which is the please forgive my pronunciation of it, but it was called the Rosé Rubiae et Ore Crucis. They studied magical principles of scrying, astral travel, and alchemy.
Can I
So
dip my toes in that one as well? Or
absolutely, because I'm going to
okay.
dip over into first order, but the
Yep.
third one, I really don't have much to share about it. This was the secret order. So
Maybe I want that one.
I think you have to level up into this one.
Oh,
So
okay,
like,
okay.
this one was said to be the Order of the Skilled Leaders. And really, the information I could find about this order was that it was highly secretive. They were kind of the leaders of the organization overall, and they were called the Secret Chiefs. So,
Okay.
yeah, there's so much information to share about all of this, and like we could do it off podcast or maybe for Patreon sometime.
Yeah.
But that's just a little taste of occulty goodness that I wanted to give you in the short time I had today.
So are there still members of the Golden Dawn today?
Yeah, so there are still practicing members, but I don't think that it's like a secret society type of thing anymore with the different sects you can get into.
Right.
That's how I found out that the current members are studying more so philosophy in magic through the Golden Dawn's teachings. And those are the people who believe that there are those 42 missing texts somewhere in the world that will fill in Hermes the Thrice Great's final teachings.
Okay.
Hmm.
So interesting.
Yeah. Do you want to do the connection here for the natal chart? You feeling up to that? So for you this week, we have October 16th, 1854, Dublin, Ireland, 3 a.m.
Wow, we actually have a birth time in
Yeah, for way
1854.
back when. It
I
might
love
just be,
that.
it might just based on this person, that might just be part of their allure, but it's what I found online.
Okay, this makes sense. So they are a Libra. Yes, we're in Libra season. That makes sense. They have a Leo moon and they are a Virgo rising. Okay. So, first things first, I see that their Mercury is opposing Uranus. So, they have their Mercury in Scorpio, which means that they would likely be interested in topics such as like the occult or esoteric things. Typically, people with Mercury in Scorpio, they love to go deep. They want to explore like hidden things. They want to know the truth. They want it like the gossip. They want to be in
They want
the
the
know.
gossip. Hmm.
Yeah. And so this is opposing Uranus, which would make them an unusual thinker, somebody who thinks outside the box and who is maybe like possibly progressive for their time,
Yep.
or something that would have just kept them always questioning or always thinking about things in a new way. They have an unaspected Venus, which I found kind of interesting. So their Venus is in Libra in the second house, and
What does that
there's a
mean?
couple.
Why do
Yeah.
you find it interesting? Because there could be something here that I want to pull out.
Okay.
Mhm.
There's a few ways that we could read this. So an unaspected Venus could make it so they had a hard time connecting romantically to people in their lifetime. And again, I don't know if you have like data on their romantic life, but
I do.
oh wow, okay.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Hmm.
there could have been issues there. Sometimes we'll see it like where they're not sure like what they want, or there's like questioning of maybe sexuality. I don't know, but like or just like untraditional relationships for the time, and like feeling like you didn't relate to like certain, like maybe like wanting to not be married when that was like the thing that everyone did, you know?
Hmm.
So there could have been like slight untraditionalism with that. But Venus is in Libra, so relationships were very important to them. Like sometimes I would read this as like, oh, they weren't interested in relationships at all. But I'm not seeing that because their Venus is in Libra. I'm also seeing there's like a love of the finer things in life. They've got their Sun and Venus in Libra, which is a sign that like loves beautiful things, and it's in the second house of like your possessions and your material goods. So they liked to have nice things. This is something I would feel confident going with
Yeah,
that.
check mark. There you go.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Yeah, like I don't always. Sometimes I'm like, well, sometimes it could be. I'm like, no,
no, that yeah,
I don't.
that's not a wobbly at all. That's
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah,
So,
no, I wouldn't read it that way. Yeah, so they have Saturn conjunct their midheaven in Gemini. So the midheaven is the highest point of the chart. It's what was like basically overhead at the time of your birth. So the constellation of Gemini was overhead when they were born, and Saturn was right on top of it. So what this tells me is they were somebody that like worked very hard. Like they're a hard worker. They put in a lot of effort and energy, but a lot of it was done mentally. It's in Gemini, which is a mental sign. So they were like a big studier. They were a big like reader, or somebody who did a lot of education,
mhm.
maybe like spoke a lot, maybe a lot of public speaking or writing. Like there's just a lot of energy and effort being put forward to learn. And that's what they're known for. Like there's like a legacy of like their mind that would be following them. And then,
Christ, Ash. Like,
yeah,
do you know who this is? Like,
no.
okay, I just had to
I
check.
thought, I mean, the only people I know associated with the Golden Dawn were Pamela Coleman Smith and Aleister Crowley, and you said it wasn't. You brought up
It's
both of them, so I'm assuming it's neither.
it's neither. Okay, then let's
Okay.
keep going. This is in even with the germs floating around you right now. This is your scalpel reading. I think that we've done
Okay.
so far.
And then finally maybe I'm better when I'm sick, like
Yeah, you just don't care. Just letting
just
it
like
fly.
whatever. Okay. Jupiter is conjunct Chiron in the 5th house. So this would make them somebody.
I knew Chiron would be in here. My boy would show up for this.
Yeah, so he's hanging out with Jupiter. The two of them are acting as a single unit, and this is in the sign of Capricorn in the 5th house. So this makes this person a little playful. They're not super serious. Like even though I see like a lot of dedication and hard work and research, there's a little whimsy here.
Holy shit. Yeah.
And but there's also like pain around that. Like it's almost
Holy
like
shit.
yeah.
I try to hold back. I generally try to hold back on these readings, Ash, and there's no point this week.
Okay,
Like I know I'm handing you like confirmations on a silver platter, but this is wild. Keep going. I'm so sorry.
No, I'm almost done. Yeah, like there's, I don't know why, but maybe they were made to feel like that was bad or wrong. But like there's also sometimes with the Chiron in the 5th house, there might have not like had a big family. There could have been like, because the 5th house rules over like children and stuff. So sometimes you see this with people who aren't able to have children for some reason, or sometimes you'll see it with people that maybe had something that prevented them from fully enjoying their childhood when they were actual children. So then they started to become more whimsical and playful as they got older, just to kind of make up for the childhood that felt like it was lost.
Yeah, makes sense.
Okay, that's what I've got for you.
Well, normally I'll be like, oh yeah, put a pin in that. I'll explain it later. Listen to everything I explain because you amazingly described the astrological forecast for Oscar Wilde. Like this is so accurate. It's incredible.
I love him.
Yeah, you gave me the idea. Or at the beginning of this month
Libra
when you were listing off
season.
famous Libras, I was like, oh, we have to do Oscar Wilde if he's popping up.
Yes, I love him. He's a great writer. Oh my God, yeah, you're right. Because like all the stuff in Gemini with the midheaven, that makes perfect sense. He's known for being a writer. He's known for like his dedication to the craft of writing.
Yep.
Yeah, he's also like very decadent. Like just kind of, he was like a dandy. Like he dressed really nice.
Absolutely, he was.
That Sun and Venus in Libra in the 2nd house. Yeah. Oh wow.
This was your bullseye. Like this was so good. And
All
I'll
right,
explain
sick
a little
astrology.
I'll explain a little bit about his life. And I'll explain about his connection to the Golden Dawn as well. But before I do that, I gotta recommend to you. There's a YouTube, like just a brief comedy series out there called Edgar Allan Poe's Murder Mystery Dinner by Shipwrecked Comedy. That it's like I think maybe 10 quick episodes that you can watch. Is perfect for spooky season, especially perfect for you, Ash. Edgar Allan Poe pulls together 8 famous writers throughout time to come to a dinner party at his house. So they have like, Ernest Hemingway and Elizabeth Dickens and my favorite character, I think he steals the show, is the guy who plays Oscar Wilde at the dinner party.
Oh my gosh,
like,
I can only imagine.
Like this isn't an ad or anything like that, but if anyone's listening and you just want some literary humor in your life, the Shipwreck comedy series is so good. Okay, diving into the whimsy that is Oscar Wilde. For those who don't know, he's a 19th century author, poet, and playwright whose talented words, outlandish style, as Ash had mentioned, and imprisoned homosexuality contributed to some of his greatest works, It's right.
The Venus.
The Venus, including a picture of Dorian Gray in The Importance of Being Earnest. You're gonna find so many similarities to your reading, Ash, in here as we go through it. So he was born to an ophthalmic surgeon and a novelist. And so Oscar Wilde is one of our first historical figures that we've done here on the podcast that grew up with means. However, as you alluded to in your reading, he was homeschooled until age 19 or age 9 by both a French nurse and a German governess. So less so his parents. They
Okay, so that could kind of be like Chiron in the fifth house, like not really being fully having like a regular childhood.
Correct. He did not
Yeah.
have a regular childhood. But what
Mm-hmm.
he did have instead was an opportunity to develop his love for languages through both of those people. He also wasn't popular in school initially, but eventually it's told that he won over students by being able to tell them wild stories. And his teachers noted that he had spent less time socializing with other children and more time consuming really thick books at incredible speeds. So he had a natural talent for this. They said that he could have near total recall of most of the novels that he was able to read as a child.
So cool. That's
I know,
awesome.
I want that.
Yeah, I know I read a lot of books, but
I don't.
I probably couldn't recall them.
Yeah, I can tell you the vibe of the book, but that's
Same. I
about.
remember vibes like nobody's
Yeah,
business.
exactly. But the details are a little wishy washy.
I don't know.
So, unlike our abilities, his ability earned him a scholarship to Trinity College in Ireland, where he studied Greek literature. He excelled there again. He reached the college's highest academic achievement. And because he was able to do that, he won a scholarship to Magdalen College at Oxford. So he's really paving his own way through academia at this point.
Saturn conjunct the midheaven. Yeah, hard worker.
And so now
Remembered for it.
we're also going to jump back to your reading again here, where at Oxford, he developed his own style and began to test boundaries. So this is where, unlike many men of his time, he started to wear his hair long. He stopped playing sports because he really had no interest in them. And it said that he decorated his room at Oxford lavishly. And
I love
there's some
it.
pictures you can look up and see them. He has feathers and plumes and fabric, like it.
Oh my
It's
God.
really
After my own heart. I love
he's
that.
feeling himself, that's for sure.
Yeah,
Uh,
big fan.
so here he also, because he's pushing those boundaries, he starts to dip his toes into the occult. So while at Oxford, he explores Freemasonry, and like everything he does in life, he climbs the ranks really quickly. And I don't know the significance of what this means. But if we have any Freemason listeners, maybe they can chime in. But he raised to the order of sublime degree of Master Mason.
That
It
sounds very
huge.
important.
Yeah, it sounds
Yeah.
huge to me. Um, Unfortunately, his first heartbreak comes when he returns home from school to Dublin to find his childhood sweetheart has been engaged to Bram Stoker. Like, no joke. Like, this guy's life is crazy. Like,
Oh
so
my God, that's like gossip column. That's like today's like, our celebrities. That's like what you would see in like People magazine or whatever back then.
absolutely. That's like Taylor Swift finding a footballer instead of like a country singer or something like that.
Exactly. It's just what everyone's talking about.
So again, other things people are talking about at the time are the fact that he sells his father's house, who had passed away at the time, and uses the money to move back to London to find his voice. So here in 1884, he marries the mother of his two children, Constance Lloyd, again, because homosexuality was a crime at the time. So he marries Candace Lloyd, who's also an Irish writer and a lover of the occult. And fascinatingly, she ends up living the ends of her life in exile because of her belief system too. But she sounded
Wow.
like a pretty progressive, smart lady, though. And so with that understanding, she also understood her husband's preferences deeply, and
Okay.
she really did love him. So understanding what laws were at the time and her husband's preference, and what I need to like really put out there is like, this wasn't just like a passive law. There was like people were seeking out homosexuals at the time to
And
turn
it
them
wasn't
in.
like don't ask,
Don't
don't
tell.
tell.
No.
It's like we're gonna like research and figure
It's
out
like the
who.
purge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's so messed up.
So
Yeah.
because of that, and because of her love that she has for him, she invites a family friend named Robbie Ross into the safety of their home, and he becomes Oscar Wilde's first male lover. And so like that was just a really beautiful thing that she did for her husband to keep her family safe, because
Yeah.
he did love her, and he, from what I read, and he loved his two children as well, but he also preferred men.
Yeah. I mean that they like there's all kinds of like nuances and complexities within that. That makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah, totally. And now that he, finds this true love in his life, I read a biography that stated that it wasn't until 1888 that he hits an insane vein of creativity. He's feeling positive in his life again. And that's when he starts producing the most famous works of his life, and his productive period of his life really lasts about 7 years. And so it's weird because the biggest hits of his life now that I mentioned earlier, especially a picture of Dorian Gray, um, aren't a huge hit back then because they're actually despised in society for being immoral. Um, so
I roll.
I roll exactly. Well, we're learning about you in English class about 100 years later. Don't you worry, Oscar.
Yeah, I love that book.
So now it's 1895. He's, has been working on writing for years, and this is the point where we enter the downfall of Oscar Wilde because he falls in love with a man named Lord Alfred Douglas and has an affair with him. And that affair is discovered by the Lord's father, who is not having it and who is also, part of the royal system. So he's got power and he can't have his reputation take a hit. So after that relationship is blown apart, Oscar Wilde is imprisoned, and that kind of leads to the end of Oscar Wilde. He's depleted by his time in jail. He's exiled to France. He spends his last days writing about his imprisonment, which did a ton of trauma on him. And that story, if you're interested, is called The Ballad of the Gaul. And he passes away in 1900 at the age 46 from meningitis. He just fell apart.
That's so sad.
It really is sad. So unfortunately, I don't want to end it on a sad note, but throughout those active years when he was very happy, the link here that we have to Hermeticism actually comes from his wife. So they were both avid occultists throughout their lives. But on his deathbed, Oscar Wilde is said to have claimed Catholicism, which I thought was interesting. Yet every day before that, he wanted to learn it all, right? And so he had spent a time as an occultist and tried a ton of different esoteric activities, which is when his wife joined the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn and asked him to come with them. So it's speculated that Wilde attended a lot of Golden Dawn's meetings and became a secret member as well. And because of the secret nature of the Golden Dawn, we don't really know how in depth his involvement went. But because of his interest in the occult and other aspects of his life, it probably seems that he was a well-adapted member of the philosophy and the knowledge that the Hermeticism provided.
That's very interesting. That's so cool.
Thank you. Yeah. And so that's the life and magic of Oscar Wilde, who pushed all boundaries in every aspect of his life and was a true hero.
Yeah, I've always loved his writing. He just has this very unique voice for that time period, I find. And he has like these little mystical occult touches in his writing, even when he's not fully writing about that stuff. So yeah, I could see why that might have been shocking for the time. And it's also so funny that Bram Stoker was somehow caught up in a love triangle.
Crazy back then, right? Like I thought I had to go research that deeper because I was like, that sounds like fan fiction.
Yeah, it does.
So yeah.
It's like, oh yeah, Mary Shelley was in there too. Like it feels like equally over the top.
It's crazy. It's so good.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that.
But what did you think about those relationships to your astrology reading? Like that was bonkers for me to hear what you're talking about.
Yeah, that was pretty spot on. I mean, yeah, like interesting. I didn't see that coming because I didn't even know Oscar Wilde was connected to Hermeticism. I had no clue. And I also didn't know he was born in Ireland either. So I didn't put it together when I was looking at the chart at all, even though I am a fan of his. But yeah, super fascinating. You could definitely see all that in there. And there were some, like markers possibly of tragedy. I would have to like kind of go back through. But the Saturn on the midheaven is interesting. That can indicate like having to like live your life under like an authoritarian presence, like having to, your destiny is controlled by authority.
He was always under the thumb of society, and this was someone who would probably thrive now,
Oh my God, I wish he
right?
could have been around now. I
Hmm.
mean, wow. That would have been fun. I want to go to a party hosted by Oscar Wilde, you know?
Watch that dinner party I told you about. It's
Okay.
so
All
good.
right.
It's so good. But that's all I had for you this week, Ash. It was Oscar Wilde and a deep dive into his occult life.
Yes, I love that. I mean, his characters are just so they just live on and on. Like I think we had talked about how we both love the show Penny Dreadful, and
Hmm.
there's the Dorian Gray character
The
on there.
best
It's just
one.
so
Yeah, so
yeah,
good.
it's so fun. So fun.
Well, I hope you feel better, Ash. In time for
Thank
next
you.
week, we'll probably keep it remote because I don't want to get sick again, if that's okay.
Yeah, let's do that, and then for we'll be back for Halloween. I hope in
Yeah, we
person.
have an idea that we're gonna do like a live special on right around Halloween for you guys.
Yep.
Hmm.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us, and you know where to find us. If you look in the show notes or in the credits of this episode, you can see all of our social links, and you can find us on Patreon or book a reading or do whatever you'd like to get more Unclouded Eye.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for listening this week.
All right, bye. Unclouded Eye stars Ashley Brooks and Ty Gowan. It's produced and directed by Nick Nordfors. Music is by Ashley Jane Cecilia and Jay Karen. Our community manager is Aaron Cross. Our art is by Dawn Aquarius. Unclouded Eye is presented by Haunt Me. Follow Unclouded Eye at Unclouded Eye on Instagram and TikTok, or on Patreon at unclouded_eye.